Yo, what's up, family? This is Labtekwon hollering at my man Patty Lane on wordisbond.com. Future Shop for you.
Who would I consider the spoken word artist that had the most influence on me? Personally, I say that there are three people that have influenced my style and my perspective of spoken word, but I've enjoyed a great deal of artists. But first off, I give props to Amiri Baraka. To me, Amiri Baraka is the equivalent of what Afrika Bambaataa did for hip-hop culture. Amiri Baraka didn't invent spoken word, but he combined the elements of what we identify as spoken word and represented it in a way that it was constructive for my community, the community of black people. He was able to take relevant issues and things that were affecting black people on a whole and put it in a format that the average black person could listen to and understand the message that was being given. And he wasn't doing it in a way that was so highbrow and so elitist that only people that were super duper into poetry could relate to it. But at the same time, Amiri Baraka combined the element of music, soul music and jazz, and formed this fusion of spoken word with music and rhythm, which later evolved into what we call the art of emceeing. So I give Amiri Baraka props as far as spoken word is concerned, the same way I give Afrika Bambaataa props. He was a pioneer. He didn't necessarily have to invent the art of spoken word the way Bam didn't necessarily invent the idea of taking two turntables and making a break extend, but he took the formula of using these different elements of art to convey a greater idea and sense of culture to the mass of his people. Also, Amiri Baraka founded, my most influential group of spoken word artists, the Last Poets. Out of the Last Poets, who's affected me, I would say stylistically speaking, in terms of the way I do what I do as an MC and as a poet, hands down, Gillian Kane and Omar Ben Hassan. There are other members of the Last Poets that I give the same respect to, but in terms of personal style, Gillian Kane, who was from the Right On album, and he also did another album called The Blue Gorilla, a solo album, his style was, Future Shop. He took elements of the most basic style of poetry, which was like almost what some people call street rap or the dozens, or even, the musings of a dope fiend. He could take that and then elevate it to the most advanced form of intellectual discourse through poetry. The experiences that we have in the hood are not limited to what has been romanticized, as the cops and robbers gangster culture that America has built on every culture and community that's ever came to these shores. Everybody that's ever come to America has subscribed at some point to this gangster culture. I love the work that Gillian Kane did because he showed the dichotomy between who and what we are before we got to America and how it's affected by America. With art, people want to reduce you to an extreme, like you either super nerdy, intellectual, or you super hood. That's ridiculous. If we've reached the apex of oppression, we get closer to God through that process. And I think a lot of times people don't want to accept that, yeah, you can be from the hood. Yeah, I used to ride a skateboard with a 9mm in my book bag, and at the same time, I was trying to be more than what people told me I was. That's the dichotomy. Gillian Kane always represented to me through his work as a Last Poet, and beyond that, what he did on the Blue Gorilla. Another artist, as I mentioned before, Omar Ben Hassan, he does the same thing, in my opinion, where he can convey so much of what is overlooked as just being, maybe a dope fiend's musings or somebody in the hood that only know hustling and getting over, but at the same time reflect and show you the depth of insight that is often considered impossible for somebody that's so taken under by the hood experience. Omar Ben Hassan is definitely, inspiration, and I consider him someone that has been a teacher through his work, and that to me is what the example that he set is that his art shows the dichotomy, the range of black folks in an experience that is extremely detrimental to our psyche and our spirits and potentially can be destructive. He showed how we can come forward with art that encompasses the depth of our despair and the potential of our greatness and still not compromise it, so that anybody that hears it, they know that tone, they know that energy, and they can relate to it. It's not just for the intellectuals, it's not just for the people in the hood, it's for anybody that's got soul. So Omar Ben Hassan, Gillian Kane, and Amiri Baraka, those are my primary spoken word artists that have influenced me. I'm not really influenced by the modern spoken word artists. I really don't consider them in my pantheon of mentors in terms of art, but there's some guys that I do have respect for. The homie E the Poet MC, he's from Baltimore, pretty good poet. He does good work, and he also brings it into the context of hip-hop culture. Talam Acey's pretty good. Saul Williams has some pretty good stuff too. I dig some of Saul's stuff. The brother Lamar Hill, he does some good work. He's very influential in the new generation of spoken word artists and poets. A lot of people jack his style, so I respect those guys more as peers. But my personal pantheon of spoken word artists that are untouchable in my perspective, it's Amiri Baraka, Gillian Kane, Omar Ben Hassan. My attitude is I take the example and I just go forward with it. It's a foundation that I build on, and that's my perspective. The question is, it says that I've considered myself a battle MC, and what do I consider the differences between freestyle and a written rhyme in a song structured format? To me, the difference is very basic. When you write a rhyme, it is in fact a freestyle, but you add the element of editing. So you can take the best parts of a freestyle, write them on paper, combine those ideas, the best parts of what you had as a freestyle, the freestyle being a stream of consciousness of ideas, and then you take the best parts, put it in a structured format, make it fit to a musical composition, and then you have a song. Now, just a freestyle without the editing, a freestyle is just a stream of ideas and thoughts. So to me, it's like they're both similar. One part is raw and the other part is refined. The question is, what are the advantages of releasing all your albums on your own independent opposed to signing with a major? That question is a little bit off, because the truth be told, I do work with other labels, and all my releases have not been on my label. I did a retrospective with Mush Records, a punk company called Morpheus here in Baltimore. I did a release with them called The Hustler's Guide to the Universe. Did another release with them called Avant Garde. So, you know, those are just some examples. I work with other labels. I work with major labels. So I work with Warner Brothers and Strictly Rhythm on a project I did in 2007 called 410 Pharaohs. 410 Funk was the name of the album. I work with various entities. I don't exclusively do everything on my own label. So within that, I say that working with a major, it has some advantages. You know, one thing is that the budgets are larger and they wire transfer it to you very quickly once you've executed a covenant. And that includes licensing, that includes distribution deals, various different types of scenarios that a musician or artist can work with a record label or record company. It's not limited to signing as an artist. I think that's antiquated, it's outdated. I'm new school. I'm not from the era of trying to shop a demo and get a deal. I'm from the new generation of people that are DIY, but within that space, yes, I do work with other companies. I do work with major labels to get things done. It's a business, and you know, if you don't really understand the nature of business, you may miss the point. The ethic of what I create musically is consistent. You know, really the only difference is, like, it's just a matter of perspective. There's really no general thing. You know, I put out albums on my label on a schedule, but I also will license and distribute it through other labels. So just to answer the question, the pros and cons on both sides, they balance out to the point where, according to the situation, some stuff comes out on my label, Ankh Records. Some stuff might come out on Warner Brothers with, you know, the 410 Pharaohs, or the thing I did with Mush with Song of the Sovereign a few years ago, or the stuff I did with Morpheus, you know, whatever. I guess that's the answer to the question. It really doesn't matter to me. I do what makes sense according to the project. I guess the best thing about having my own label is to give the opportunity to other artists. That probably is the most prolific aspect of it. It's not just what I do as Labtekwon. Right now, the highest selling artist on my label is Megan Livingston. Her album, Black Becky and Artifact Hearts, are doing pretty good. So that's an advantage, that I was able to do A&R and find an artist that had a great gift and come up with some projects that we can release, and then she can reach other people. So that's awesome. But yeah, you won't catch me taking no bad deals for some cigarettes and a car or no shit like that. That's definitely not what happened. You know, I can read and count, so you're not gonna be able to get me in the okey doke. The question is, why did I decide to become vegan And how did I get hooked up with Green America? I decided to become vegan. For me, it was a process of just trying to improve the quality of my life. There was a song back in like 1990 by KRS-One Boogie Down Productions called Beef. The song was like really prolific, and it was like the first real educational song that I had heard that really talked about food and the process by which food comes into existence. So like in 1990 I decided to be vegetarian. You know, I was young and I basically started to feel the effects of smoking cigarettes and, you know, drinking alcohol a lot and eating pork and beef and, you know, just living a lifestyle that long term probably would have cost me a lot more. So I decided that I wanted to first improve my quality of life by the foods I eat. And by 1997 I had read African Holistic Health by Alalia Hotep Africa, and it really gave me more insight to vegan lifestyle. For me, it was just a matter of improving my quality of life. Being vegan, it's a culture of freedom. Agriculture in itself is the ability to cultivate the earth and bring forth life from the earth that can sustain human beings. It's an organic concept. It's something that I harken back to my ancestors in the Nile Valley. Their mastery of irrigating the waters of the Nile for the purpose of agriculture is one of the highest feats of engineering in the history of man, even more so than the pyramids in my opinion. Yeah, that's why I became vegan. The thing with Green America, they just hollered at me. I have a song that I did like in '98 called Now Cypher. And Now Cypher is basically kind of like my version of Beef, but it was done, you know, almost 10 years later. But it was more or less speaking on the vegan aspect of it and really going into detail about white sugar, white flour, you know, the nature of milk as it's being extracted from cows, and, you know, how there's blood and pus in it and all those type of different things. Just to give, you know, people the same kind of inspiration I got from Boogie Down Productions and KRS-One. And so that was my contribution to continue the process. A lot of vegans that are into hip hop, you know, refer to that song that I did, Now Cypher, and Green America, I think, came into contact with me because some of the vegan organizations that are connected to hip hop, Now Cypher is somewhat of an anthem. Green America hit me up. They asked me to come through and perform. They had a conference in DC. This was like 2009. I was definitely down to go, and I went, performed, had a good time, walked around, met Ralph Nader, took a picture with him, and hung out, and, you know, it was cool.